Welcome back to Gene and Roger Talk Movies. Gene was supposed to be here this week, but travelers get sick when they're flying on planes, and so he's got the flu. And it's disappointing, one, because, of course, we're doing Hereditary today in A24, and I know he would love this movie. And also disappointing because our once-a-year guests, Sarah and David, are back with us. They were here a year ago we did Green Room, and so it's a year to the day since we had you on last. So welcome back.
Thank you.
And we'll see how welcome this is because we're talking about Hereditary, A24 film. I'm going to just jump right in. Let's see, who do I want to start? David, what are your initial thoughts of Hereditary?
Whoa. So it's this constant building crescendo and then this exponential growth at the last third that is just wild.
Mm-hmm.
Not something that it's not a movie that would make me want to watch more of like the psychological / more, what do you call it, spiritual, but supernatural, yeah, thanks, sort of genre in this film, in this horror film world, but really makes me appreciate like the acting aspect of it actually, because some of the looks and on these people's faces just really is horrific.
Right. Toni Collette plays the mother in this film, and she has kind of received some universal acclaim for her performance in this role. And you're right. It's really sold by the quality of the acting that goes on in this film.
Yeah. It's very horrific.
Yeah. Sarah, where are you at with this one?
I think, honestly, it could have been a horror film without the supernatural elements. Like, I think there's a lot of stuff to unpack with the family dynamic, all of the issues, maybe so far as to say mental illness with the different characters before you even add the cult part and the supernatural part and the Satan payment part. You know?
Well, and that's interesting you bring that up because the director, Ari Aster, I think his name is, he did that purposefully, right? He wanted the first half of the movie to be kind of this family drama where you're learning about a lot of their inner workings and traumas and, you know, the whole history of the family itself. And then the next part, the last third, would just be this all-out horrific assault on your senses kind of thing. And that's how the movie sort of plays out. So, yeah, very good point with that. Me personally, I don't like this movie. I recommend, of course, every horror film fan see it at least once. But I don't buy into these. I equate this with like Rosemary's Baby. A film every horror film fan should watch. Will I ever watch that thing again? Nope, I'm not going to. I had to watch Hereditary more than once because, of course, we're doing a little podcast today. The second viewing of this did not change my mind in any way. It's well acted. The horror scenes, they're okay, but it's that whole occult conspiracy kind of thing going on with it where at the end of the day, everyone is against the main protagonist of the film, and evil's going to win at the end, and I just don't really get into those movies very much. I don't know. Where are you at, David? Did you like the film?
I think I land in the same camp as Sarah with I think it could have stood on its own with the first half or first 2/3 almost, because I was just horrified enough just by the whole psychology aspect of it. But I don't think I can't say that I enjoyed the story as much as, say, when we did the Green Room. I could kind of get into that. I was like, well, this is more based in reality, sort of, and I can kind of, imagine my way out of it. But this one, it's like, whoa, this can happen to literally anybody if you choose to accept that.
Right.
And so that kind of really got under my skin.
Yeah, and it's interesting that David brought up Green Room because we were talking earlier, and apparently you're on a once-a-year horror film kind of thing, and it's
For
only
this
because
podcast.
it's just you're going to be on the podcast. So, yeah, Green Room is not as horrific as Hereditary is, certainly. But I did like what you said, David. The beginning parts of the film are better than the later parts. I did like when the grandmother, Toni Collette's mother, dies. There's all these secrets. The woman was a very secretive person. Toni Collette is giving the eulogy at the funeral home or whatever. And there's all these people there that she's never met, doesn't know who they are, didn't even know the mother was interacting with these people. And it really does set the stage for what occurs later when you realize everyone's this occultist, coven, witch people, or whatever they are, trying to bring back this demon king or whatever that was all about.
Yeah, that was a lot.
But yeah, and so I think the setup is better than the payoff. But there is one very controversial scene, the scene that everyone remembers in this film. Were you expecting that to happen? And when it did happen, were you absolutely horrified?
I don't think I expected it. But we're of course talking about Charlie.
Oh, yeah. Yep, we are.
And yeah, it kind of makes sense because she was, going off and like decapitating birds and such. But
Yeah, she was creepy on her own.
which, if your goal is to play a creepy character, she knocked it out of the park. But yeah, it was just so sudden. But also it was just kind of like a little bit leading up, like, oh no, well, we know that she's allergic to peanuts, and now she's gonna
Eat the cake
that's got nuts in it. And okay, well, something bad is going to happen there, but you didn't really expect that it was going to escalate that rapidly.
Right.
But then from then on, it was like, well, that could have been like the, climax, the pinnacle of that whole film. But Ari went further.
Right.
Yeah, that's where the traction started gaining, I think.
Yeah.
Storyline.
Yeah, it was super slow. Like, it felt super slow and super, heart and gut wrenching the entire time. But then all of a sudden he just like rocketed you out of like what he was maybe considering the starting line.
Right. And I also liked the reaction of the older brother. The scene that we're talking about, of course, the older brother is driving Charlie, the younger girl. She's in the back seat. She's having a anaphylactic seizure situation. He's trying to get her to the hospital. She decides to put her head out the window to get some air and basically gets destroyed by this telephone pole, which had occult markings on it, by the way, if you noticed that. But his reaction after that occurs is interesting, because what does he do? He leaves the headless corpse of his sister in the car, drives home, and goes to bed as if nothing has happened. And how many times do we see that in real life when there's a hit and run and the driver just goes home trying to pretend like everything's normal, everything's fine, I can just go to bed and keep living my life the way it is. So I did appreciate that. I felt it was a real reaction from a character. We've seen it many times in our just day-to-day lives, reading the paper about somebody who's done something like that and just wanted to move on. But it was also the catalyst then, because that character, as you learn later, the character of Charlie had to die. That character did not want that female body. She needed a male body, or that character needed a male body. And so it was all preordained this was going to happen.
Right, and maybe what was shocking was how soon after that preordained death had to happen after the grandmother figure, because you would assume, oh, this has been in their bloodline for so long, they could still live out their lives even in high school, and then maybe this preordained thing happens later in the future. But the movie's like, nope, it's happening now.
Right
We're
now.
figuring this out
we are
right
getting,
now.
Yeah,
like,
we are getting this done
Queen
this
Lee is
week.
dead. Like,
Yeah. Yep, Ellen's gone. We are moving on.
Yeah. Well, and I did also like the dynamic between the husband and wife, where the funeral home calls and says, hey, the grandmother, her grave has been desecrated, her body's gone. And he withholds that information from his wife.
he plays a very distant character, I think, throughout the whole thing. maybe that's contrasting the blood not being in that bloodline, or there's been other things go on in that family where he's just kind of become this distant fatherly figure, or maybe lack of fatherly figure.
Well, he's a psychiatrist. That's his job.
Oh, so maybe he's at home diagnosing the
Right.
rest
Well,
of his
and
family.
I think that's what it is, because they set up with the Toni Collette character where she lists off when she goes to that self-help group for people who've experienced loss. She just goes off on this listing off of all of her family members and relatives that have come to bad ends because of mental health related issues. There was suicides in that family, and they talk about, what is it, DID, all this stuff. And she didn't even know her own mother really towards the end, except for the fact that the grandmother took tremendous interest in Charlie, right? Almost like Charlie is the vessel for this rebirth of this demon king, or whatever the heck that thing is supposed to be.
Yeah, it's just I sometimes was just getting kind of hung up on like the mechanics of like the ritual, even though I cared nothing for it. But I was just like, what is going on and why, and what is the order of things? They showed different excerpts out of that book, showing like, what things had to happen in the ceremony and when, but it was really confusing to me, even when she was just trying to like get out of the situation entirely and just throw away this incantation like book thing.
The sketchbook?
Yeah, the sketchbook, and like I guess not incantation, but the sketchbook, when she was trying to burn it, just
And she's lighting on fire.
and she's lighting on fire. It's like, okay, well, all right, that makes sense. And then she somehow makes the connection, oh, I must put book out in order to not burn. Okay. But then she's just fed up with the whole situation entirely and wants to burn the book anyways. But she tries to get her husband to burn the book, but then he catches on fire. Like, what?
Right, because she grabs the book from him, tosses it into the fire, and then he burns. And I can see your point there, and I don't have any special insight as to why he suddenly would catch on fire.
Yeah, and then I did a little bit more reading of like, oh, what is this Demon King? And then also it has some sort of reference to like the also King of Mischief and that sort of thing. I thought, okay, well, maybe there's like a little bit of a dark comedy aspect there, but I don't know. It's just stunning all the way through.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's any comedy on any level in this film.
We had
all.
one
Was there?
comment about
Okay.
comedy, and it was the quick flashes between day and night to transition between scenes. And we both laughed at that, where it just snaps. Like, oh, it's day, oh, it's night. Just maybe it was to keep the pacing going, or maybe that was supposed to be a minor comedic relief in that transition.
Yeah, I didn't look at it that way. I looked at it more as an artistic choice, but I also paid special attention to the underlying soundtrack. Did you both catch that weird, and I'm going to say turning wheel sound that kept playing throughout the soundtrack, especially during sequences where there was active devil activity or demon activity? Did you catch that? It was like this churning wheel. And so you would have we're screaming or we're saying dialogue, and then here's the traditional soundtrack playing there. But then underneath it, and it would get more intense, was like this circular sound, like a moving wheel or something like that, right? Where it's almost like, okay, this is moving towards an inescapable conclusion, right? Everything is moving forward. You're never going to be able to stop it. And then that sound did not occur when there was a quote unquote normal scene, right? We're having some conversation, but then when the demonic type activity would start, then that noise would occur again. Did you catch that at all?
Not a lick of it.
Okay.
But I think that means that the sound was done really well, because
Yeah.
it was so interwoven with the dialogue.
I think it just took us along.
Yeah.
Right.
I
and
do know that I did notice, like, kind of towards the end with the demonic part, there was more of the trumpeting sounds and kind of like larger, I guess, like, horror sounds, like going along with those scenes. And I remember reading something about Heyman, and how like there were some of his like sounds were like trumpet calls or like trumpeting.
Well, you figure because he has the crown on his head, and
right,
he wants to
it's
be
kind
like,
of kingly, I guess, that kind of thing. So I did notice that. I think the other sounds they did a really good job of, like, it did get quiet at the parts where it started being eerie, that it was quiet, like, what's going on?
Right.
So.
Right. It just is interesting because there's been a couple other horror films that we've done on this show where there's always this, like, it's like a third soundtrack that's not obvious unless you're really unless you catch it and then you really focus on it. And this one certainly has that. Or my sound system is defective, but it didn't seem to be that.
No,
right?
I doubt that it was that defective. But yeah, that's really interesting. I wish I could say I will watch it again to catch it the second time around.
Probably not going to watch it.
Probably not happening.
No, it's, and it's, again, like I say, this is a film that I do think every horror film fan should see once. Whether you're going to see it again or even like it, or maybe you really do like it, I don't know, but it's not in my wheelhouse at all. Of course, I'm the guy that has seen Leprechaun like 25 times, so maybe I'm an idiot, but I need movies to be rewatchable, and this one is not that. And similar to Rosemary's Baby, once you know how it all plays out, there's nothing subtle going on here. There's nothing that you're going to miss the first time around. It's just this movie that plays out, and then it ends. The ending, I'm not a fan of. It's the same ending as Rosemary's Baby, where, evil has won, and then the movie stops, and you don't know what goes on after that.
Yeah, it did kind of leave it a little bit, leave me wondering, like, okay, so they reached this end, and they've succeeded. Now what?
Right. Exactly.
But I don't want to watch the sequel.
But I don't want to know. But I kind of want to know.
Right. Yeah, and who knows what's going to happen? And that's not really the point of the film. The point was just getting to that point, similar to Rosemary's Baby and some others that are similar to this, where it's just this film where, everyone's in on the deal except for the main protagonist of the film. In this case, Toni Collette. She uncovers, experiences it all, ends up getting killed, and then evil wins, and that's kind of what this movie is.
Something I did like how they did manipulate sound was those moments of actual utter silence, that it was just so natural. I feel like those kind of things, maybe even spread across all horror genres, used, but that really draws me in as a viewer, just because it makes the situation so real. Because when you're just sitting, just say at home, you hear, what do you hear? Just the actual ambient sound around you. And they did a really good job of using that.
Right, and good horror films and smart directors know how to do that. Your cheap slasher movies, they always have the everything silent and then massive musical cue as the cat jumps out of the cupboard or whatever stupid thing happens here. Yeah. But like, I'll point out, like, The Conjuring has a really great scene in there where it's nothing. Silence actually makes the scene, and that's when the two little girls, they have the two beds in their little bedroom, and the one is pointing and saying there's somebody right behind the door there, and it's complete silence, and it's just silence sometimes makes the film scarier. You don't need these bombastic music cues hitting in, jump scary kind of things. Sometimes silence is more scary than that. So definitely was able to. I mean, Ari Aster is a quality director, no question about
definitely.
it. The acting here is great. The cinematography is great. It's just, I'm just not into these types of the evil covens trying to reach their demonic ends or whatever. I just don't like those kind of movies. But definitely a quality. A24 doesn't mess around with crap, right? So it's not crap. And until that Everywhere All at Once movie came out, this was A24's highest grossing film.
Yeah, like 80 million.
80 million, yeah.
World,
and so,
globally.
it was watched by people. It's just not for me.
Yeah, we looked up what was at the box office when this movie was out at the box office, and I have to say I was at The Incredibles and Han Solo and what was the other one?
That was our
Ocean's
wheelhouse.
8. Deadpool 2, like that was kind of the era this movie came out.
So a different kind of horror is what you were talking about.
I guess, depending on the person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's actually great because I do like when the box office is a little more diverse in their offerings, right? So, yeah, you had
This did offer
your
diversity.
Incredibles with your little kids kind of thing and, Deadpool. But then here you want some extreme horror. Here you go. Hereditary.
That
right?
is kind of cool when it actually whereas it isn't just a pure season of horror and then all of a sudden season of superhero movies and then season of like kid stuff and then
Right.
yeah, it is nice when that is available.
Well, it's not to say that I'm disappointed that October is chock full exclusively of horror films. So I'm okay with that. But I do like, you've got diverse things out in the theater and you can kind of pick and choose whatever you're in the mood for. David, anything more to say about Hereditary?
I guess it was so it was very not real for me for the latter third, but what made it really horrific for me was that initial 2/3 setup, and also like having those scenes with Peter just trying to live his normal life, but physically and psychologically incapable of doing so.
Yeah.
And so bringing that into the daylight is really what, creeps me out in general with these kind of movies, is when you bring this horror scene into the actual daylight and everybody's watching. And then you're like, whoa, that's just too real, and really effective.
Oh, all right. Good. Sarah, any final words on Hereditary?
Well, another thing that I guess what made me sleep at night after watching this was the way that my brain kind of organized the information from the movie. Was the opening scene and the closing scene both were kind of the dollhouse theme. And I know we didn't really talk much about the dollhouse and kind of how creepy that was that Annie that was what she did.
That was her coping mechanism.
It was like her coping mechanism on a lot of these things. And so the way I interpreted it was all her like dealing with her grief and her issues that had things that had happened to her, and the whole movie was actually just her little imagination with her dollhouse. And maybe he didn't actually become the payment king. Maybe this is just her dealing with her grief and it was all a dollhouse view.
Okay, Sarah, I'm glad you figured out a way to make sure you got to sleep at night.
And so I slept at night because I thought, this gal has kind of some weird views on the world.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure Toni Collette's decapitated body was up in the up in the attic.
I guess that was the way I looked at it. But
if you choose to omit certain scenes, then yeah, it works.
Right. Yeah, Jaws.
It was all a dream.
Yeah, Jaws is this great film about three guys going fishing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I hear they catch a big one.
Right. So great. David, Sarah, thanks. I mean, it's been a year, and we'll do this again December 29th or 30th of 2024.
Sounds
and
good.
Hopefully we'll get a movie that you like better next time. So thanks for joining. I have no idea what Gene and I are going to do next week, but we'll figure something else out. And I did actually find the lost audio track for the People Under the Stairs episode that we did way back in February. So I might just cut that one and get that out too as well. We teased it for like 12 episodes and never got it out. So anyway, we will catch you next week. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.